Holla ballers, what's going on? It's Preacher, but it's that BFA again. And of course, as many of you probably expect who've been around for a while, is where the Quick Looks. Quick Looks is a series that we generally do when new expansion content is out, where we have a very, very brief look at the classes and the class changes and things like that, and see if there's any glaring problems, anything that's really cool, all that kind of stuff. And we try and sum it in a nice sort of 5-minute-ish package so we can get a quick overview of the classes for you guys. Now, I'm going to reserve the right not to do this, and I want to explain why, and also probably answer a lot of questions that people have about certain classes and specs. The Battle for Azeroth Alpha is in a very weird place right now because we're doing something that we've never had to do before, and that is contend with the loss of the artifact weapons. Now, for most people, that probably refers directly to the artifact abilities that have gone. So, for example, Balance Druids have lost the Moon ability. That's gone. Frost Mages have lost Ebon Ball. Frost DKs have lost the Dragon's Breath. Unholy DKs have lost Apocalypse. Things like this. Stormkeeper. Some of them have kept their artifact ability weapons. Their artifact weapon abilities, I should say, but they've moved to talents. So we've seen things like Wake of Ashes for the Ret Paladins is now a talent alongside Crusade. Similarly with the Elemental Shaman that now has Stormkeeper as a talent, although it is only 2 charges now instead of the 3 that you used to in Legion. Now, if you browse a lot of the class forums, you're probably seeing a lot of negativity. So hopefully I can explain why that negativity is there, I believe, and what hopefully is going to solve it. So it's not just, let me get this out the way first. We're not just contending with the loss in many cases of artifact abilities, like Odin's Fury, for example, is gone, right? For the Fury Warriors. It's also all the interactions that exist within your artifact weapon. Your artifacts and weapons aren't literally just giving you an ability and then that's it. That's not what they do. If you open your artifact weapon up, you'll actually see many, 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 many talents that some have very little impact, so they might just be more damage or something along those lines. But there are also then 1 or 2, 3 or 4, depending on your class and spec, that actually modify how your class works and gives you these little interactions. Your spells work in a slightly different way. Things happen when you cast certain spells. All these things, and that includes all the things that we got extra when Concordance became available. You might remember that when Concordance became available, it wasn't just a case of we got a new Concordance button. We actually got some new traits to go along with that that also modified how our spells work. So simple things like, for a Frost Mage, for example, when we cast a Frozen Orb, our Blizzard becomes instant cast. All those things are gone as well. For the most part, for the vast, vast majority of players, all those things are also gone. And that is a lot to lose. A hell of a lot to lose. Now, when we move over to Battle for Azeroth in the version we have now, it's extremely difficult to say how things are looking. It's extremely difficult to say how things are looking. And that's because we've lost a lot. For many, many specs and classes, we've lost a huge amount. And we haven't gained pretty much anything for anyone. Now, I'm generalizing a little bit here because in the vast majority of cases, this is the truth. This is what it is. But not for everybody. There are some that are relatively happy with some of the changes they've seen so far and some of the simplification of what's gone on, because there is some simplification there. Another big factor in this is the fact that Blizzard is starting us in Battle for Azeroth with extremely terrible gear. Extremely terrible gear. We are not capped. We are limited to level 113 of the potential 120. And they are starting us in level 185 greens. Now, that probably sounds crazy if you're not aware there's also a stat squish and an item level squish going on. They're dropping everything down to bring it more into line before numbers start hitting the 10s and 20s of millions, which is something that's bound to happen over a course of an expansion that's been out as long as WoW. Some people seem to think it's unreasonable. Nobody's losing damage, but WoW's existed for so goddamn long that, of course, it makes absolute sense that eventually, as we keep turning things up, it just gets too high to the point of ridiculousness. So a stat squish is taking place. So if you checked MMO Champion today, you'll see that they posted, actually, a chart of where the stats and the item levels are. So what Blizzard's attempting to do on Battle for Azeroth Alpha is the starting characters, those of us who managed to be lucky enough to be in the alpha, they're starting us in pretty much the worst possible case you could be once you arrive on the shores of Battle for Azeroth, right? You're in the worst possible case. And that's important for Blizzard to understand that people are going to be fine, because not everybody's going to be transferring their mains, right? At the start of the game, sure, but there'll be other people who are going to start after Battle for Azeroth, or maybe only just capped just before Battle for Azeroth or shortly after, and are going to be joining us in Kul Tiras with terrible, terrible gear. And it's important to know whether or not those characters can survive in that environment, or are things tuned way too difficult. Now, the problem that you'll have in terms of recognizing whether classes are any good is if you have ultra terrible gear, you have none of the stats that you are used to playing with very easily in Legion right now. So if you're playing Legion right now, you will not have on a spec that relies on something like haste, right? Like a Shadow Priest. You're not going to have what we have in Battle for Azeroth, which is like 15% haste, right? That's what we have. And although we do have access to 2 dungeons, which I want to point out here, yes, we start in 185 gear. The first dungeons, the very first dungeons, are actually dropping 265 gear, right? So it's almost 100 item levels higher from your first dungeon. So we are starting in the absolute worst of the worst gear. So that means we're lacking all kinds of stuff. We're lacking crit, we're lacking haste, we're lacking mastery, we're lacking verse. We have basically no good stats on any of these characters, and there's not enough options out there to gear up to actually solve that issue. What that all translates into is that our classes play really badly, really badly. A Shadow Priest trying to stay in Shadow form for a while, and I'll tell you, I've played it. It's not the easiest thing in the world. You're in there for a few moments, and then you're going to drop back out, and that makes you walk away with the impressions like Shadow Priest is fucking garbage, because it just doesn't work, right? It doesn't work very well, because the way it's supposed to play isn't working out. And a lot of us who play these alphas also choose talents to try and counteract that. We choose talents we might not really want to utilize properly. So Surrender to Madness, yeah, it's great, you know what I mean? It increases our insanity generation, but the fact of the matter is I cast so slowly, I can't stay in it for very long. So I'm stuck with this stupid debuff for a very long time and things like that. Now, that being said and good, now I just want to give some context as to why the feedback right now might be really bad. So why I do the quick looks and going through class by class and explaining all this stuff to you? Well, frankly, there's one missing ingredient here which could be the answer to a lot of the problems, and that is the Azurite Armor. Because I'll be honest with you. Despite the gear, I've played with terrible gear in alphas before and had no issue talking about the classes and the changes and things like that. I've had no problem doing that. But I can't really do that now because I'm hyper aware that there seems to be a missing piece of the puzzle. For the vast majority of classes that I've played so far, I've not played them all. It feels like these are the bases of the spec. This feels like the foundation versions of the spec, but they're missing something. They're missing something crucial that actually makes the spec work, that makes it fun. And fun is a phrase that is being thrown around a hell of a lot in terms of Battle for Azeroth. People are saying, yeah, the specs kind of work, but they're not fun, right? Like, Moonkin's fine without Moon. I mean, it's doing reasonable damage, and in fact, maybe even overpowered damage right now, but it's not very fun. And that's the problem. And that's the problem in a lot of cases. Now, gear will be a factor in that. The fact that we're leveling up is still going to be a factor in that. But ultimately, we are missing spells like the Moons, which were kind of an interesting part of playing a Moonkin. And that's not going away. Maybe. It is hopefully, or my hope, I should say, my hope is that the missing piece of the puzzle is the Azurite Armor. And within that Azurite Armor, whatever Blizzard decides to do with it, are the interactions and perhaps even new spells, if they decide to go that far, and I hope they do, that allow you to really unlock the potential of your character to what it's supposed to be. And this isn't what your class is supposed to be right now. I would like an official word on that, because maybe I'm just pie in the sky hoping, and I'm sure some of you will think that. It's like, nope, this is what we're getting. But as we know, Azurite Armor comes with options that modify how your spells work. That's what they are. Now, that could come in multiple forms. In an ideal scenario, what I'm hoping for is that the sources of Azurite Armor, I suppose I should explain this for those of you who don't know, is that Titan Forging is around, but there's going to be a new type of armor. There's no more tier sets called Azurite Armor, which will take over various item slots. It looks like it's legs, shoulders, and chest, I believe. Should be Azurite pieces, and we have a new necklace called the Heart of Azeroth, which is similar to the artifact weapon, except it's basically just an Arcano crystal. It does level up as you collect Azurite around the world. It'll level up. And this leveling up of your Heart of Azeroth necklace allows you to unlock traits that are inside your Azurite Armor. So you'll get a chest piece with various concurrent rings, and they will have choices of things that you can do to your spells to modify them. In an ideal world, I would like it that those pieces that drop in, say, Dungeons and Mythic Plus have interactions and abilities that are very, very good inside of a 5-man dungeon environment. Similarly with PvP, if you get the PvP Azurite Armor, then it should have spells and abilities and modifications that work well in a PvP arena. Similar with raiding. The Azurite Armor that you attain from raiding should also be modified in a set way so that you're tailoring your character towards the raiding environment. Now that's what I'm hoping is going to happen in an ideal world. If it turns out that Azurite Armor is nothing more than 2% extra damage on Lightning Bolt, or your 3% haste on Fireball, the stuff that we saw that was in the boring sections of artifact weapons, if that turns out to be the case, we will rock straight on with looking at the classes and assessing them and going from there. And I've got to be honest, it's not super pretty. The world is fantastic. The storylines are good. Drustvar I thought was a lot weaker than Nazmir so far, but we only have access to 2 zones. We only have 2 dungeons. We don't have a great deal to work with here, and we're limited to, as I said earlier, level 113. I'm waiting, Blizzard, and you need to show us this Azurite Armor. I believe they need to do that because the frustration of players on Battle for Azeroth seems to be growing. From what I can tell and from my community, it seems to be growing. I played through several specs on stream. I've played several more off stream. And each time it's been a relatively negative experience because at the moment, there's no getting around this, guys. It just feels like we've lost a lot. And in most cases, we've gained nothing. Some classes and specs have gained something. And that might be one spell. Like the Holy Priest has a new excellent spell. But that's about it. For the other specs, it just looks like they've lost. Like you've just taken stuff away. And it's very noticeable. Playing Fury without Odin's Fury is very noticeable. It's not the most amazing spell in the world. It's just a one-hit wonder, does a lot of damage. But you can feel that it's gone. When you hit that execute phase and the Juggernaut stacks and all this kind of stuff isn't happening, you can feel it. It's very obvious that this stuff is not there, and it used to be there, and that used to be a more fun experience than what we're getting now. Please, Blizz, I beg of you, show us the Azurite Armor so we know exactly what we're getting into here. Because you've created a great world with some good stories to be told. Very good stories in many cases. Very adult stories, which I am all for. Big thumbs up. Your dungeons are beautiful. They're interesting. They're funny. They show the classic Blizzard humor. Great. But right now, if someone was to say to me, and it's most often regular question I get asked is, what am I favoring right now for Battle for Azeroth? Nothing at all. And I'm not lying there, I'm not exaggerating, I'm not trying to clickbait anything. What I'm saying to you is right now, not a lot, because there's no spec that I've played so far that I thought, oh, that's really fun. Because they're not. They actually, for the most part, and in fact, in the cases of things I've spent more than, say, half an hour on, they have been worse than what we've had in Legion. So that's where we are right now. So in terms of the quick looks and stuff, I'm sure other people will be putting them out. I fully endorse you guys checking them out if you want to see spell changes and stuff. Right now, I think it's way, way, way too early to draw any meaningful conclusions until we see the bigger picture. I think we're trying to, for me, it feels like we're trying to give a review of a picture when we can only see a part of it. Because I think the Azurite Armor is going to be the switch that really opens up all the doors. Until that time, I'll prepare as much as I possibly can for the inevitable time when we can actually give you the fuller picture. Thank you so much for listening, guys. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.